This is Duke University.
Robert Bourgi, with a kind of secret advisor for French President Sarkozy, gave an interview to a French weekly paper, Le Journal du Dimanche. He accused former President Chirac and former Prime Minister de Villepin to have received millions of dollars from 5 African presidents, from 5 African states: Senegal, Burkina Faso, Ivory Coast, Congo-Brazzaville, and Gabon. According to him, according to this Robert Bourgi, this money has financed Mr. Chirac's electoral campaign since 1997 and 2005. I myself took part several times to the handover of brief cases to Jacques Chirac himself at the City Hall in Paris, said Bourgi. Oh. I don't know if briefcases is the right name to translate what we call mallette, but that means that some great deal of banknotes in them. And the ELF trial that took place in Paris between 2002 and 2004 showed that this public-owned French oil company, which was the center of a giant network of corruption in Africa, has been used as a kind of go-between in order to offer a percentage of Gabonese oil revenues to French politicians. Because this reciprocal corruption was public, that Nicolas Sarkozy promised to end it during his electoral campaign in 2007. In Cotonou, Benin, he promised, I quote, a more transparent African policy, and he added, we have to get rid of these networks of past times and of the unofficial go-betweens who have no other authorization than those that they invent for themselves. The problem is that Sarkozy maintained 2 parallel policies. While he repeated that he had no links with old De Gaulle and Chirac-style African networks, and that the priority was to develop relationships with non-Francophone African countries like Angola or South Africa, Sarkozy gave the Légion d'honneur, the most prestigious decoration in France, to Robert Bourgi soon after his election.
I find it very funny to think that in the French embassy you would have Africans coming in with these little drums, the djembe, stuffed with money, and then the French president would sit in his office, which by the way has no AC, so he usually sits there in the summer with his sleeves rolled up and count the banknotes. I really like that idea. And when you go there, I think you can't help going into that office and thinking about when under other circumstances he would precisely do that. If you go back and you read the official memoir of the godfather of Franco-African networks, the Gaullist networks in Africa, Jacques Foccart, you can find an entry in 1971 speaking about a meeting with President Pompidou. He is telling the president, and this is on the record, so it's published, and he was the official advisor of the French presidency, and said, oh, this Houphouët-Boigny, Ivorian president, is such a nice person. He sent us money bags or briefcases full of money for the impending electoral campaign. So I speak about it to the president and say, what shall we do? And the president says, oh, that's really nice, gentil in French, I really like that, just gentil, a congenial attitude. And why don't you keep a bit and send some of it back? Okay, here it is, on the record. So Bourgi just said what we knew to be standard practice in what someone called, and I think it's quite pertinent, the Franco-African state, this special, the French exception of decolonization, and you end up having an informal state, not on paper, not legally, but in reality.
Neither in France nor in the rest of Francophone Africa, this hasn't at all been perceived as a scandal. The fact that this person goes public and says publicly what was known, even though very few people had proofs, none of this is seen as a scandal. And for me, that is the most significant point. That it is not seen as a scandal might be read either as apotheosis of cynicism, both in France and in the continent, insofar as Franco-African relations are concerned. Nobody cares any longer. People are so fed up with it that somewhat they don't care any longer. It is recorded in a book written recently by Lilian Thuram. Lilian Thuram, as you know, was a major soccer player in the French team. A year or so ago, he wrote a book called Mes Étoiles Noires, my Black Stars. And in that book, there's a chapter on a black French whose name I can't remember now, but who basically managed the defense of Paris during the First World War. The soldiers are standing in line, and he's the chief of the army, and he's doing the revue des troupes, and he salutes all of them, and then he comes face to face with this black man. And then he asks him, okay, c'est vous le nègre? You are the nigger? And he says, oui, mon commandant. Yes, my commandant. How do you say it in English?
General. Yes,
My general. And the general says, oh, eh bien, continuez. Continuez. Just carry on. Carry on being the nigger. You are the nigger? Yes. So, well done.
Wouldn't it be Negro rather?
Negro, whatever.
No, I mean just, there's a nuance, I think that, you know.
Yes, you translate it. I think a long historical cycle is coming to an end. There are still residues of an imaginary there, but that imaginary is being replaced very, very fast by a new geography of the continent, which prefigures, let's say, other movements in which France will be just a parenthesis in history of a continent that will hopefully find its own center and become its own power once again.
I think there is a lot of malign neglect in France. They just think they have this post-colonial laziness. This used to be our place. These people are our people. They cannot walk away from us. And I would entirely agree with Achille that the sooner they walk away, the better the French will realize that that is not a given. But there is this, whereas not to take the US, I take Germany. The Germans are really intrigued by Africa, like other countries, like Turkey these days. And so they make offers, they're interested, they're curious. The French are not. The French couldn't care less about Francophone. And so there's the malign neglect and the laziness, real laziness, not doing their homework. And then don't forget, France is the country, the Western country, that has been in economic crisis for 30 years. I think within the European Union, Africa loses leverage, but would you like to have more leverage through the one-stop counter that France used to be for Francophone Africa? I don't, and probably Achille wouldn't either. So maybe we go through a phase where there's less influence mediated by France, but eventually there will be more influence because Africa comes to the table herself.
Produced by Duke University. Online at duke.edu.